Hello everybody, this is Jimmy Beach. Welcome to our exposure webinar. In the next few minutes we're going to take a tour of post-processing in exposure. We'll touch on all of the major steps in the workflow. Alright, so exposure is our advanced non-destructive raw photo editor and organizer. So we're going to go through organizing with exposure and then we're going to show editing because that's typically the process of when you're, editing photos. So exposure handles your full post-processing workflow, as we'll show you. We can use it to copy images from camera cards, and then organize, apply editing adjustments, creative effects, export, and you can even print directly from within exposure. A quick history lesson about exposure is that about 15 years ago, over 15 years ago now, exposure was developed for film photographers. And that was to help them with transitioning from developing analog film in the darkroom to then processing images on the computer. It was completely and utterly different, and they, lost touch with a lot of their favorite films and chemical processes they used to use. So, our Exposure's accurate film emulation presets essentially gave film photographers their much-loved analog films back, and the rest was history. So as we get into the demonstration, I want to point out that there is going to be time at the end for Q&A. I'm going to hit escape here, go back. This is the grid view. I'm going to hold down or hit the tab button, and then that'll bring up my panels here in exposure. So ingesting images or copying images from your cards, this is usually where the workflow begins, so that's where we're going to go first. So I will bring up the copy from card dialog. Now when you put a camera card into the computer, excuse me, exposure usually recognizes that card and it will bring up this interface. Now, before I get into this demonstration, I've actually had people say that they hate it that it does that, so let me show you. If we go into the preferences here in exposure, they are preferences. Then here on the general tab, we can tell it to where is it? When a camera card is inserted, see it right there, launch copy photos from camera card dialog. So I have it on, but if you want to turn it off, you can turn it off right there in the preferences. Anyway, back to the demo. Okay, so here is how we copy images from our camera cards. There are 3 numbers here across the top. There's 3 easy steps. Step 1, select the source. So we have our camera card selected. I want to point out that you don't need to copy them from your camera card. If you have an external hard drive or something like that and you want to make a copy of all those images, you can do it right here too. Okay, exposure handles a lot of different RAW files. So in addition to TIFF, JPEG, DNG, and even Photoshop PSD files. So there's a lot of images that it'll work with. Excuse me. So here in point 1 or step 1, we did select the source. In step 2, we go to choose which images we want to copy. And we have all of them checked right now. And then step 3 is where we're going to save those images to. And we want to put, it's a standard location on the desktop, that's fine. Actually, no, let's put another folder. I want on my desktop, I have a photos folder, so I'm going to open that. It's not in desktop photos, and then it says here, generate subfolders, and it has a folder titled Kyle Allen. Now, these are his images, so that lines up just perfect. We can also rename the files if we want to add our own renaming convention if we have one here, for example, this is a wedding. This is card 1. This means the names of the people, and it's a wedding, and this is the first card and the numbers of the images. That's how I do things. But I don't need that. You can also apply metadata, which helps you to keep your images organized. We can also add things like we can add images to collections, which is another way of organizing them on your computer. You can add keywords to help you find them and locate them quicker, and we can even add presets from exposure to your images as they're being copied. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK, and it's going to give me an error, and I wanted that on purpose. So I already have these images copied to this location on my hard drive. So I am going to stop since I already have these images copied. Actually, no, let's replace them. So here, it's on the desktop. You can see where it's going to go, and there's the folders or the images coming from here, and it's going to replace that one. So we'll just say, do this for all and replace. and it'll copy them all to the hard drive. Now, one of the great things about exposure here is while it's running, I can continue to work. And this leads right into the next phase of me, talking about exposure. So let's go to that folder that it's made, and you can see that it's copying those images in here. So it is in the process. You can see that the, what is this thing here called? Progress bar, thank you, is still plodding along right here as I'm talking. And I can go in here and begin to make changes to these images if I want to. So I can mark, I'll put color labels, for example. There's a way we can mark them. So color labels, I put 6 right there on my keyboard. I can push 7 for this one if I want to. That's yellow. Now, I can also do other things aside from just color labels or whatever. I can actually go in and edit these images. This one right here looks a little dark, so all this puts auto processing on it. Nice. So there we go. Right? So now I'll hit escape. Now, the progress bar is gone, but I'm still working. I can still go through and still make edits to these images. So, that's something I wanted to point out. You're able to do that in Exposure because Exposure doesn't use a catalog. It is catalog free. Okay? So, because it's catalog free, and there's not a module as well, that's why we could go in and do edits. Because it's catalog free, you can immediately begin working like I showed you, even while things are being copied. So if you were copying thousands of images to your hard drive and you want to go through and start to identify which ones are your favorite ones or which ones you don't want to edit, or when there's somebody that's blinking, or et cetera, you can begin to do that as those images are being copied. Now, so it's a little bit of a quicker workflow, the way that the Exposure is set up. So I do want to, let's get into how we can organize in Exposure now that we've kind of saw how it works. So over here on the left-hand side, this is the Folders panel here up at the top. Oops, let's open it back up. I'm going to close the Presets panel. We can drag this splitter down here. Here we go. This is the Folders panel. So inside of Exposure, this is the exact same thing that's on, oh look, the hard drive. So on my desktop, inside my photos folder, is the Kyle Allen folder where we just copied all those images over. So all I'm doing is just clicking through different files right here on my desktop. Okay, so it's exactly the same, so there's no new learning curve like when you're using a catalog or something. The file management capabilities like delete and all that stuff, they're right here on the right-click menu. You can reveal in Finder or rename or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, also, there's collections on the bottom. I mentioned collections before. The collections are a great way to organize or group together images from various locations on your computer and without making duplicates of those files. So you can create as many as you want, and you can even make collections within collections, just like this, to have a hierarchy to the way that you can get through your images with a hierarchy that way. Okay, so let's go back to our folder here. Kyle Allen was where we were. Yeah, we're still on color. Okay, so there are 3 things that we can use to organize our images in Exposure, and that would be flags, stars, and color labels. Now, we already talked about color labels, but we're going to go through all 3 of them really quick right here. So if you look inside of the thumbnail window here in the grid view, on the left side, there are displayed here are the flags. So we can set our flags by clicking here. Now that's pick. We can also right click and choose which flag. Pick reject or unset, right? So reject, and then you can see that it dims it out. Hey, I'm seeing that you guys are raising your hands. Why don't you type something into the chat? That would be easier for us to field. Okay? I'm going to continue going. I'm sorry that I got distracted there. Okay, so we're back to flags. So we can choose them right there with a right click, right? So unset. Or we can use the keyboard. So if we use plus, we set it to pick, or minus would set it to reject or reject. If you hit minus again, it will remove whatever is placed, whatever flag is replaced. So it's an unset flag. Okay, so if I use the keyboard, my arrow keys, to get around these images, I can quickly apply flags just like this. Now, I don't need to do it when it's in the grid view. I can also do it in the full screen view like this. Here, see, that one looks a little dark. Oh, that's better. We can use the same things here. We can add a pick flag with plus. We can make a reject flag with minus. If we hold down shift, that's a modifier key, and then we hit minus or plus, then it will advance to the next image automatically. So if I hit escape here, you can see it in the grid view. I'll hold shift and hit plus to flag that as pick, and then you can see it move to the next one. And that really picks you up if you can see, which images you're looking at, if you don't need to get really close to them, or if you can see someone's not looking at the camera right there, things like that. It's really easy to identify and quick to apply. Now, if we make it all the way through here, let me go this really quick here, shift. And I am randomly doing this just for the demonstration. Sorry. Okay, so now we've applied our pick flags. So what we can do now is use our filter and start to narrow down the images that we have in front of us. So we are just going to go with the ones we have our pick flag. Okay. So now what we can do is apply star ratings if we wanted to, which will rate these images as to which ones we like the best. So let's say we begin and we do our pick flag, pick or reject. Well, and then we can go back through a second time. We only have 25 images. It tells us right here, 25 images. So if I want to pick, let's say that now I'm going to apply some star ratings. I can either make the thumbnails larger to apply or to view them like this, or I can just hold down the shift button. Oh, actually, no, I was going to double click. I can click and zoom in so that I can look at them a little bit closer. And then I do the same thing where I'm going to apply a star rating, but I'm going to use the numbers 1 through 5 on my keyboard. So I'm going to hold down shift and push 4. Say this is a rating 4. That one I like the face better, I'll say 5. And then it's going to zoom into their next one, and you can see that her face is in the exact same spot. So I'll say 5. I like the face there too. So, and we can continue to do this as we go throughout the whole folder. See, and you can see that I have the ratings are here. Underneath all of these images in the top row, you can see that the stars are applied. Now, you don't have to do it one at a time like I've been doing. You can select many of them and apply a star rating, or you can select all of them and remove all of your ratings by pushing 0. That sets it to 0. Okay. So now, color labels is the last thing that we can apply to these images. That's on the right side. And if you right click, you can see all of the options you have here, all these different colors. Now, the 6 button on the keyboard, number 6, is red. Number 7 is yellow. 8, 9. Now, if we had a 10 button, we would have put this one in, but sadly, there's not a button for that one immediately. So what we can do is apply these with there's 7, 8, 9. Okay? So as we go through, same thing applies. If you hold down shift and hit any of those keys, then you see that it'll apply the color labels as quick as you can go. Then, so now we've applied our flags, which we've narrowed us down to 25 images, I believe. 25 from 56, I believe. So cut them in half, and now if we have, let's say we want our blue images, we just choose the ones that we have that blue filter applied. This is the filter down here. Okay, so that's a pretty quick and easy way that allows us to get through organizing our images really fast. So I did throw out a whole bunch of keyboard shortcuts, and I want to point out that you can get all the keyboard shortcuts you want right here in the help menu in Exposure. You just go down to keyboard shortcuts. Also, if you are a little more advanced and you want to program your own, you can pull up the Preferences panel, and you can see them right here. You can change any of the ones that you want to. Now, this is pretty advanced, but if you came over from Lightroom, let's say, there's a preset in here that you could use, which changes a couple of the keyboard commands to be more compatible with if you're used to working in Lightroom. So that's kind of a handy thing. I leave mine alone for the most part. Okay, so now that we've talked about how we can color images and organize them inside of Exposure. Now let's talk about how we can edit those. Now, before we do that, we said that Exposure doesn't have a catalog, and this is where I need to drive this point home. Exposure doesn't have a catalog, you're right. But we've been applying a bunch of organizing information to our images, so where is that saved since there's no catalog? enter screenshot. Right here, you can see I'm on the desktop. I have a photos folder, and then all of these folders inside of it, just like here in Exposure. So if I click on any of these folders here that I have on my desktop, we can see there's images, and inside of the folder there is an Exposure software. This is a sidecar folder right here that Exposure puts in. So anytime that any of these images are edited or there's any of these applied organizing tweaks, then you will see it all right here as a sidecar file. So that stays right within that folder of images. So if you want to move this, let's say, or archive it, you can just grab a hold of it and move it somewhere else to another folder if you wanted to. And all of the edits and all the organizing information goes along with it. So it makes the process really simple. All right, so let's talk about editing images now. So I'm going to go to a new folder, and we can see that we don't see any images, and that's because I set a filter down here on the bottom. So I'm going to set reset. Now, these are all images from John Barclay, and there's a bunch of different ones, and they're from all over the place. So I did want to show, that there's a lot of diversity that you can do in working in Exposure. Also, segue, here's another little tip. If you have an image like this and you want to rotate it, you can do it right here at the top on the grid. Pretty easy to do. Anyway, some people ask about that, so I wanted to point it out. Okay, so we're editing now. Let me look at my notes and make sure that I cover all of the bases. I don't want to keep you guys short. Okay, so let's open an image. So when we're processing photos, you do two things when you're editing adjustments, and that's the first thing is that you apply corrective, you correct any issues inside the photo. And the second thing that you would do would be to use adjustments creatively. So let's do all the correcting issues in photos first, because that's typically the first things that you do when you address things in editing, and that would be like lens correction, sharpening, transforms, stuff like that. And you noticed how I was doing pushing the auto buttons on those ones that looked a little dark, things like that. That's also something that I would say would be for corrective. So that would usually be where we start. Now, one great thing about the auto button inside, Exposure. Great thing about Exposure is that you don't have to work on one image at a time. So if we wanted to look at this folder, for example, and edit any of these images, if we have some that are lighter and some that are darker, we can apply our auto adjustments to all of them all at once, and then we can go in through there and begin our editing process. So I just applied the auto to all of them at once. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to apply all of the same settings. These are intelligent settings that Exposure applies here, or intelligent adjustments. So as I click on this image, we can see that exposure is up about a stop, whereas the next image, the exposure is not really up at all. So it's not applying the same control or the same correction to each of these images. It's doing it to each one of them individually. So Exposure studies them with the auto capabilities. Okay, so now typically the first things that you do is that you're going to make corrections. Let's look at, here we go, this one. So I already hit auto with this one, so if we ever want to, we can hold down the / key, which shows us the original image was untouched versus the auto. It's a little darker. Okay, so we can see here, this one's pretty plain to see. We can turn on lens correction if we want to. Let's see here. So this was with Fuji, and here was the lens correction profile. Now, Exposure uses profiles for the lenses that are supported, but you can do it. This is an automatic version. You can also do it manually if you want to, and you can change your own correction here. That's for distortion correction in particular. But that also, you can set vignette correction as well with a profile, and chromatic aberration correction. So you can do it with a profile, you can do it manually. Also, let's talk about transform. Transform is kind of like, cropping and rotating. This is for issues like we have in this photo. So I'm going to close this dock, make the photo a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to turn on constrain crop. which means as we make adjustments, then the image will shrink inside of this crop window. You'll see it in action in a sec. I'll also turn on grid lines, which you can kind of barely see right here on the sky. And what I'm going to do is attempt to get these columns that seem to be sinking down into the earth straight. And so I believe that would be a horizontal lies a vertical. There we go. And then we can see as I make this adjustment, then we just do that until it kind of looks better, more realistic. See how straight that is now? Yep. Okay. So that was it. I just dragged the vertical slider down. That straightened it back out. I can close the transform panel. Bada bing. If I hold down the backslash key, we can see the before and the after. I'll do that one more time. Okay, cool. So another thing that we would do to make any corrections to the image would be things like sharpening. So that would be something that we would do, or noise reduction. So sharpening inside of exposure is right here on the sharpening panel, and we can add a little bit here with the amount slider. Also, if you can remember to hold down the Alt key, that's what you need to remember. And then when you do set these, the radius, which is the size of which the sharpening is applied, or how wide it is. And you can see how it comes in there. This is telling you which edges you're going to, or how wide the effect is going to be applied. And you can see where it's going to mostly be on the branches in the top. And then we can hold down the Alt key again, and let's drag the masking slider, and this is going to tell us how much contrast there needs to be in the edge in order for it to be selected and sharpened. So when all the way down, every edge will be sharpened, and as you drag it down, then you tell it which edges in particular. So usually you only want to sharpen a certain amount of stuff. So if we're going to highlight just those leaves in that top, then that'll be good. And then sometimes I drag the amount really, really high in the sharpening so that I can see the edges, and then I turn it right back down. But we have videos that talk about how to use all of these panels, so I'm just trying to give you a quick run through on how to use them. So, okay, yeah, so we've made lens corrections, we've done some sharpening here. I don't think that we need any noise reduction. It looks pretty clean. So yeah, let's talk about creative editing now. So these were the adjustments that we made to fix this image. Now we can do some creative stuff. So creative stuff begins in the presets panel. So close the folders panel, open the presets panel. I'm going to close everything. So inside the presets panel, there are lots and lots of options. So Exposure's rendering engine was built to accurately emulate film, even down to the little subtleties of individual film grains. So the presets in Exposure, they simulate a wide variety of these iconic looks. So, and they're organized into folders, so you can find which type of look you're going after. For example, print films here. But this is a landscape. Print films usually are a little bit more gentle on coloring and saturation. Slide films, however, are not. These guys kill it. So you can see here this Velvia, as I hover over these thumbnails, you can see the image in the center changing. Now, if I just click to apply this, it will apply it, but we made some other adjustments. We made basic adjustments, sharpening, lens correction, and transform. So I'm not going to update, I'm not going to oversave that. I will just drag Fuji Velvia right over here to add layer, boom, and then it applies it right over the top. Looks a little harsh to me, but still cool. You can see that it punched up the colors quite a bit. I can turn the opacity of that new layer down, gives me a little bit more control over the effect if I place it in its own layer like that. Oops, that's the thumbnail, or that's the mask. I'll get to that later. Also, we can, if you did it like this, you know, where you're having some opacity there, we can also double up. So if we wanted to add another effect, like one of these crazy contrasty black and white infrared, or color infrared presets, we can do that as well. And then we can control the opacity of that to blend it with the other look. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't particularly effective mixture, but it does kind of look like fall, doesn't it? All those colors, that's cool. Anyway, I just wanted to show you what was possible and that the presets are a great and easy way to apply a look really quick to an image. So I'm going to get rid of, right click, there we go, delete layer, get rid of that. And I'm going to get rid of this one too. So instead, I'm going to go with one of these brighter ones. Yeah, let's go with that one. Gold. Okay, cool. All right. And so you can add as many layers as you want to when you're working in exposure, and we will get to that here shortly. Okay, so we already pointed out the auto adjustments, and so we're going to start working and actually making edits to the images. So yeah, basic adjustments is essentially where you would begin. So let's go back down to this first layer. Basic adjustments is essentially where you would begin because those are the basics. So when you're making adjustments in any of these panels in exposure, talk about basics, essentially every time you start working, start at the top, and then you make your way down through each one of the sliders in the panel. So the ones at the top of the panel usually dictate what's going to happen at the ones at the bottom. So for example, in this image, we have our exposure slider, and I'm going to move it up. Okay, so our exposure slider controls the exposure. It controls most or almost all of the levels of tone in the image. And then if we want to make some adjustments to our exposure slider, like let's say make our highlights, well, the highlights adjustment we're making here only affect the highlights. So we're really refining the more major step that we made when we made this exposure change. Okay, so and then from highlights, the whites is an even smaller area right above the highlights or blending into the very highest bright parts of the highlights. And if we make adjustments to that, that's even further refinement on just those values. And the same thing with the shadows and the blacks. Shadows is a certain a certain amount of the hue, and then blacks is an even smaller amount. So anyway, so you refine it as you work your way down through that list. This is what I'm trying to get at. Okay, so I want to point out too the difference between vibrance and saturation. Saturation is a control that applies to all of the tones in the image, even the ones that are already saturated, whereas vibrance will only grab the ones that are not already saturated. So it's a little bit more of a gentle, it's a little smarter of a tweak to make. So let's close the basic panel. Now let's talk about the color panel. The color panel gives us a lot of different options. Let's let me make let's go to another image. Okay, let's see here. Let me hit the backslash key. Okay, so here's our image. And we went through and we did the auto adjustments, right? That's the only thing that's been applied to this one. So now let's look at the color panel. I think this is going to be a little bit better of a demonstration for you. So on the color panel, this is another great way to make adjustments. You can do quick and easy things here at the top. The color filter is like adding a plastic or glass filter over the end of your lens. So you can just do a little bit of warming, for example. Like that looks good on this image. Or cooling to make it a little bit more like nighttime. You can also add a whole bunch of different presets just that are like this. These mostly are they do, sorry, a bunch of thoughts hit me all at once. Most of these color filters right here are used in black and white photography, but they do a lot of cool stuff to color photography as well. I'm going to turn on that warm again, like that. Okay, and then we have the detailed adjustments down below. So, and that is the hue, saturation, and luminance controls. These control different aspects of the colors that are inside of this shot. So this image in particular has a very weighted look that has blue on one side and kind of this orange on the other. And so I would say we should probably play that up to make this read a little bit stronger of an image, right? So we can make adjustments to each one of these sliders for the hue, which changes each of the coloring or the color. And so, but let's say we can select on one at a time and say, well, we want to make the yellows in the image more orange. or we can make it more green. So we can see at the horizon down here on the left, if I drag that to the left, it looks more red. Okay? Now, all of the images are colors. All of the images' colors are a mixture of different tones. So you can use the tone selector tool here and select a certain tone in the image, like the blues and cyans, to make adjustments to them if you wanted to tweak those colors, just like that. Now, I was pretty happy with them the way that they were, but I might make them a little bit more purple, just like that. Okay? So that's the hue. That's to control the hue of the colors. Saturation is the same thing. You can actually control how saturated these tones are as well. Now, there's another tone tool or tone selection tool here. We can do the same thing where we select that tool, come over and drag up to give the blues a little bit more presence in the image. Now, I don't need to click out of it. I can stay on the same tool, and then I can go over here to the oranges and do the same thing. I want them to be a little bit brighter too. Now you can see that this is correcting a bunch of different sliders over here on the in the panel. So I don't really need to know exactly what combination of sliders I need to do. I can just punch it up with this tool. Really handy. Also, you can just punch up, or you can make controls, or you can make adjustments to the controls for the highlights, shadows, or midtones in particular. So sometimes, like if you have a wedding shot and you pull a little bit of the highlights out of it, this is a trick, but it makes it look a little more vintage. But for something like this, I'd probably punch it up. I wouldn't want, okay, so I think I wouldn't turn the highlights so that all the highlights are completely saturated. I think I like that it kind of gives you that distance where it gets a little gray, but I do like having those midtones up. All right, anyway. Luminance is the same thing, but it has to do with the brightness values on each of the colors in the image. So same thing applies where we have the tone selection tool, and we can make adjustments just like that. Bam. Okay, so that's, the color panel. Lots and lots of controls in the color panel. And tone curve is another way to control the hues or tones in the image, and there are tons. If you frequent the curve editor, then you'll feel right at home here because this looks just like the curve editor inside of Exposure or inside of Photoshop and Lightroom and pretty much everything else. So yeah, if you're comfortable with the curve editor, you can just add points to the curve. You can make adjustments just like that. You can take those off there because you made a mess like I did. Or you can select from presets right here at the top. Anytime you're in Exposure, there's always going to be presets somewhere. Ooh, that's cool. Looks like Mars now. Anyway, okay. So yeah, anytime you see a drop down like this, there's presets. And anytime you see an icon like this, you can save whatever you've done in this panel as a preset. So double heads up. So you can also make adjustments like to the curve if you have a curve that you put in here, let's say like I do. And then you can make further adjustments to that curve if it's not quite exactly what you wanted. You can see it in the dotted line. So let's get rid of that. Okay. And then at the bottom you have split toning, which adds a different tone to different hue values in the image. So if I wanted to put let's actually pick a preset here. There's a bunch of presets. Most of the time, split toning is a black and white photography thing. But there are some color looks too. Now, so this is a black and white photography look, but I'm applying it to a color image. See, and then I can change the strength to take that bluing out. That's kind of cool. Or I could turn it down. I can also, these are fully customizable, so you can do really whatever you want to with them. That's kind of cool. All right. So now let's talk about the more creative effects panels. Okay, creative effects. Let's go. This one's pretty. Okay, so backslash key. That's before, that's after. That's all we've done. The auto adjustments. Okay, so We have inside of exposure, there's a spot heal tool, and it has a heal mode, and it has a clone mode. I'm going to use clone mode this time because there's texture. If you can see down here where I want to get, let's get rid of this thing. There is texture in this image, and because there's texture, I would use clone mode. Oh, that's in the street. Anyway, so you can make your adjustments to how the tool is going to work here in the bottom set, and then after you place your spot, then you can control the active spot after you make it up here on the top. So I'm going to make it totally make that path thing disappear. There we go. Gone, just like that. Okay. And let's see, what else do we have here? We have a vignette tool. Oops, here we go. Vignettes are a really great way of helping. This actually has a very natural occurring vignette because of what's happening with the clouds. This image does. But vignettes are a great way to take control of the viewer's eye and focus it on the subject. So inside of exposures, you have some very easy to use controls to make organic looking vignettes that were made by hand. And you can control it however you'd like to. I'm just playing around with it here so you guys can get an idea of what is possible. You can add distortion in and then control it with the size of these giant lumps that make that distortion happen. So I will, there we go. And now drag it back down so that it evens back out there. So I can turn off any of the effects on any of the panels with the toggles right here. So that's all I've done. Let's just add a little bit of a punch with that vignette. Very subtle, but very effective. Okay, and then let's talk about bokeh. That's another way of applying or controlling the viewer's eye. So if I go to the if I go to bokeh panel, I said bokeh for like 11 years, and then someone that was Japanese corrected me very nicely because it's a Japanese word. Yes. I felt great that day. Okay, anyway, so bokeh panel, this actually adds creative blurring effects to an image. So you can see how I have it here. And as I turn it up, you can move it and control it with a focus region. Now, these are manipulatable, so I can say, like, you know, if I want to have just the very center of the image be in focus and then make this kind of looks like a toy camera lens when I do it this way. You can control it just with this radial thing. And then this is the inside of the effect where there's no blur be applied. And then the outside here, the feathering edge, you can control that and move it all the way out and have it, the effect of the blur is applied at full strength at the feathering edge out here. So that's a subtle tweak, this little bit of blurring that happens here. We can also get rid of this focus region and do it with a, what is this one called? Planar region. And this is, you can make the look like it's a toy model if you have the right perspective. That's what you can do with this, kind of a tilt shift look. Okay, I'm going to turn that panel off. But anyway, lots and lots of options there with the bokeh panel. And then grain. Exposure's grain is second to none. There's ways that you can control every little bit of the way that the grain applies and is applied in the image. So I'm going to zoom in here. You can see it in the background pretty clear in the sky. So we can control where it applies, how much, right? The grain strength, the amount and where it applies in the image. So if I want more grain to be in the shadows, I can bring it up there. And then if I want less to be in the midtones, I can take them down. That way the sky back here, you can see how it's updated and it doesn't have that grain now. It's more subtle. So we can control it just like that and add it wherever we want to. And we can also give it more roughness, color variation, etc., etc. And you can even go with presets for what type of grain and how much there is applied on your photo. Okay, and let's see here, overlays. So overlays are a great way to punch up an image or give it a little bit extra flavor. There's borders, light effects, and textures. So these are fun to add some creative elements to your images. So let me turn on light effect here, and then we'll see it apply. So there's a ton of different options that you have when you go through these. So some of them go all the way around the photo. Some of them look like stars. Some of them look like prismatic leaks. And let's see here. Let me pick one and put it in here. So whenever I have a rule of thumb when I'm putting overlays on images, and I don't want to introduce a new color with them unless I don't have any color or unless it works. So usually I end up going with something that's just white 9 times out of 10. But anyway, so we can add this type of thing however and wherever we would want to, and we can move it around and make adjustments to make it larger or take the opacity of it down. We can even change the blend mode of it so that it does a little bit of a different effect to the image instead of what it would typically do. And yeah, there's a lot of opportunity that we have here. There's also a place where you can, down here at the bottom of that panel, we can give it an area to protect from the effects that we are applying. See? So if we don't want it to hit here in the center, then we'll say that we want to protect that center, and then that applies elsewhere. Okay, so I'm going to close that. All right, so we've applied a couple of edits to these photos now, and so now is a great opportunity for us to mention layers because we've made our way through. So layers are a great way to bundle effects or controls together inside of exposure. And so So let's, we have all of the edits that we've made here, and we can see them with our cheat sheet by looking right here where you can see this reset button appear. On the grain panel, it has a reset, and the overlays panel, and the vignette panel, and the basic panel. Now, it just so happens that those are where we made adjustments on this layer, and we can see them all listed if we hover our cursor over the thumbnail in the layers panel right there. Shows us where every single one of those adjustments we've made. So that's kind of handy. But layers allow us to, let's say, make different applications. So we've already seen that we can apply a preset in a new layer. And that would enable us to control this preset separately than all of the other adjustments that we made on the image in the first place. So we can turn off all the other edits that we made and turn them back on. And then we can turn our preset off and on. So there's a bunch of different opportunities that we have here to control stuff. So, excuse me. So what else can we do with the layers? Well, let's add a layer, and then I'm going to touch on the brush tool. That's going to click. You can see I clicked on the thumbnail, or that put me over the thumbnail, how it's highlighted here. And when I hover my cursor over it, you can see that it turns red and shows me where that mask is in the center of the screen. Now, what we can do is go and choose a preset. So now, looking at this photo, I have a couple of things that I'm not really happy with. Let's make some adjustments. So I'm going to say I'm going to put a little bit of lightening. I think that this roll off on this corner over here is a little bright. So I chose dodge layer. I can make my brush a little larger, control my flow, see how it appears there on the screen. And then I just want to brighten this just a little bit. Now it goes really fast because dodge is a very strong effect, so don't be scared. You can go way overboard and we can tone it down. So there we go. I'm just going to do it like that. Okay, so now I applied dodge just to that spot, and then I can control that very easily with the opacity slider. See? It's too much. So then we can turn that off and on and see what happens to bring that bottom corner back into the image. That's a little too much. Okay. So, hey, that's easy, right? Something that's handy. This is bothering me. I'm going to have to get rid of that. So back on this first layer, I got to turn that down. I got to close my brush panel, and then I'll go back to overlays. Oh, yeah. There we go. See, that's much better. All right, see, now I can keep talking. All right, so went back to the first layer you can see here because I wanted to adjust that overlay that I had right there. It was just too bright for me. But this is looking better. Now, I like how this corner down here is really dark because this person right here is really dark. I kind of think that works its way out. It's a weird shot, before and after. Okay, cool. So we have a couple of different, things that we've done here. We've done dodge here. We've added our preset. Let's see if we have another example, like where we want to do something else. So let's, actually, I do. So we have some really cool coloring going on here. I'm going to hold down the backslash key again, and then I'll let go. So we have some really cool coloring happening, and I want to punch that up. We can see that the light that's coming on here is warm, has a warm tone to it, but I don't have any warm in this sky, so I think I want to add some warm to the sky. So I'm going to do that. I actually have a preset for that. And for landscapes, I use graduated filters all of the time. So this one's color wash, or that's great. That looks awesome right there. Okay, so anyway, there are a bunch of these that we can choose from. So color wash orange in particular, I'm going to put a new layer with that one on there. And you can see what it's done. And it's put an orange tone on the left. And this one is used a different way of selecting. And that is, instead of using the brush like I did before, this one, you see this pin right here? If I click on it, it opened up. That is a gradient, just like where we did this with the bokeh panel. This one is just controlling this color that we're applying to this photo. Okay, so I like that. So we can make adjustments to the way this behaves, like so, and move it. Oops. I added a little bit of brushing there. I didn't mean to. There, and move it off into that corner. Ooh, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, cool. So there we go. We have it applied right there in that upper corner. Now there is one more way that we can make selections, which would be how we applied this right here. See how this is the mask. You can see how it's red where it's selected and black where it's not. So red is where the coloring on this layer, but the effect from the layer is being applied to the image is where it's red in the mask. So if we go down to our lighten, then we can see only in that bottom corner is where we are applying that. And we did that with the brush tool. Now if there's something in the image that we want to mask and apply a different effect to, let's say, I don't know, somebody's face. Okay. I'm going to apply a preset over this image right here. And I will go, let's do something that we can definitely see. Okay, so like one of these, which has a lot of dark coloring and stuff. I don't like that border. Okay, ooh, yeah. Okay, so this one, okay? So I am just gonna click on it. So our Kodachrome is being applied to this whole image. Now, we are gonna show you one quick and easy way that we can mask out right here, and that's gonna be the end. We are totally almost done. I'm gonna click on the brush, and that's gonna select my layer mask right there. See, it's red when I hover over it. Okay, and then on the bottom, I'm going to use the color constraints. And the color constraints make really, really quick work of making selections. Now, our image here has coloring of her skin, obviously. And that coloring just so happens to be different than pretty much all of the color in the rest of the shot. So this is going to be really easy. So we can just select from the presets here, but then, well, that's brown and, right? Actually, it's more red-orange. But let's I want to undo that reset. But let's select it like this. I'll use the eyedropper, and then I just go over to the tone that I want and select it. See, it's in the red-orange tone. Now I can turn on Show Mask so I can see what I'm selecting, and now that was just the automatic selection. Now we can make adjustments to these sliders down below here to tighten up our selection. Right? So. And typically, yeah, you can see them change as you make adjustments. So, there we go. We're getting rid of that really dark tones in the image. And what else? And nope, not those ones. And the really black ones. I want to get rid of the really black ones. There we go. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to turn off the show mask. We can see here where it's red, we have selected. Okay, so there we are. Now, I reset my stupid, dang it. Okay, so I messed up, guys. Well, let's, so now we have our preset. So I'm going to click that same Kodachrome, and I did it backwards. I need to invert my mask. It's only being applied, I'll turn it off and on, It's only being applied to her skin, right? So I'm going to invert. And now the preset's being applied everywhere except the skin and her lips. I didn't realize that. But hey, we have our brush tool, so we can tell it that we also don't want to include that area. Am I on the wrong thing? Yeah, I was. Dang it, eraser. Get rid of it, get rid of it. There. So I can just use the brush along with the color constraints to make selections just like that. So they all work together. So anyway, now we have our mask there, and we've applied that preset to the background of that image. And that's a quick and easy way of making a selection. So I just wanted to give you a use case scenario for why you would want to use the color constraints to make a selection. So that's a really good reason. So if this girl, if you wanted to put skin smoothing, for example, there's a skin smoothing preset in here. Soften skin, I mean. And so you can do the same thing with that. So okay, so that's all we have to do about layers. We've talked about how we can make our selections. All right, so we've made some adjustments to these images, right? So I'm going to close the presets panel. All of the things that we've done have been saved inside of exposure. Here, right, we can see in the history panel all of the different adjustments that we've made, and we can go back through each one of these adjustments back in time if we want to go and make some changes or adjustments or whatever. And so we've also made adjustments to a bunch of images in this folder, so you can see that all of these adjustments have been saved as well. Okay, so all of that information is saved again inside of the sidecar file, which is right here, photos, and we are in the John Barclay folder. So, and we can see he has exposure folder. There we go. So all of the edits and information that we did here today have been saved right here inside of this folder, so we don't have to worry about it. And if we want to make a copy of it, we can just click and drag and put that, copy it all the way over and make a quick and easy backup. Now, because exposure stores its image data in these sidecar files, well, if you synchronize edits across multiple computers with a tool like Dropbox, then as long as this folder is synced on both computers, then all of the edits will be synced to all computers as well. So if I just had Dropbox right here, I could just drag and drop this into my Dropbox folder, and it would share with everybody else that has that folder, all the other computers that are syncing that as well. So, you know, if you're working with an outside retoucher or a team of people or something like that, you could do that, and it's a viable option. Okay, so exporting is the last bit of this big thing. And so, when we do exporting is pretty easy in exposure. We can go right up to the top here and file and export. And that allows us very similar scenarios where we've started this process. You have a destination where you tell it where you want to save the image. Then you say what you want the file name to be. And then you give file settings, like make it a JPEG or a TIFF or whatever. And then you set the quality of that. You can save metadata to it, or you can remove the metadata from it. And you can even include a watermark if you have one set up. And then you set the size. And then you hit export. Now when you hit export, whatever you have selected here will be exported, one image at a time. There's a little bit of a quicker way to do it in exposure, and that's with quick export. Now quick export, essentially these are recipes across the top. And you can select multiple recipes at the same time. So this recipe here for Facebook, it will save, this is the destination, it will save a folder on the desktop. Inside the export folder, there will be a folder called Facebook. It will have a photo with a photo sequence name and JPEG quality, and it will be this big, 20 by 48 on the long, right? And the one for Twitter will be in a Twitter folder, sequence number, etc., 1024. Instagram, bam, 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 it's 1080. You see it as you go down this list. Now, I have 4 of these selected here, so if I hit export, oh look, it tells me right here. I have 1 image selected, but I'm exporting 4 images. So it's going to make me different images at different sizes, and we'll handle them differently for all of these different uses. So this makes it really quick and easy for me to be able to export and get done with all of my images and all of that all at once. So that concludes our demonstration today. So we can turn our attention over to answering some questions. Now, I don't usually include the questions and answers in the video recording that we're making, and so I will leave you with a few comments, and then we'll start answering questions. So if you want to get in if you'd like to get in contact with other exposure users, we encourage you to do so on our Facebook group, the Exposure Users Facebook group. That's a great place to connect with other people, to share tips and tricks, to share what you've edited with exposure and how you've used exposure, and for people to share how they've used exposure. If you want to post your work and share it with others and us, we would love to see it. Please post your work on Instagram and make sure and use our MyExposureEdit hashtag. And we want to thank you for your interest in exposure and for watching the video.